What is up, you guys? Welcome to 10 Pin Life Podcast number 19 featuring Verity Crawley. Verity has become an absolute stalwart on the PWBA tour. She is always in the hunt. I mean, if you just look at this last season, she had one bad event, and obviously the season isn't done yet as they roll into the Lucy this week, as well as into the final 3 stops in Texas next week. In this conversation, we hit on a lot of really cool stuff, including her process of going from the UK to being on the team at Weber International, kind of what her professional bowling career is like, what her process is like, and how she's made some transitions professionally in her mental game as well as in her physical game. And a lot of other cool stuff, including kind of her experiences recently with working directly alongside Norm Duke after one of the coolest moments in bowling ever. Before we get started, I do want you guys to know that this episode is sponsored by Bowl Dry Enterprises. Greg was cool enough to send me one of these fans a couple months ago and really take it for a test drive, because one of the rules that I live by here on 10 Pin Life is I won't sponsor products that I don't believe in. So I said, Greg, if you want to sponsor the podcast, absolutely, but I gotta try this thing out and I gotta make sure it's worth it. And honestly, I've been pretty impressed with the sustainability of the battery, but also the durability of the entire fan itself. And honestly, it's just a good thing to have in your bag. I never really was a fan user before having this fan, and now I have it on all the time when I'm practicing or if I'm bowling league, just to have it on my hand, keep it nice and dry. Now that we're coming into the summer months of July and August, it's pretty much on all the time just to make sure that I can either keep myself warm, put it on the bottom of my shoe in between shots to make sure that that stays nice and dry if it's humid, or on my hand. Honestly, it's just everywhere, moving air around, and you take it for granted when you have it and then you don't have it, like I have a couple times here over the last couple of weeks, and I've really missed it. So be sure to head on over to bowldry.com, that's BOWLDRI.com, and use the code 10pin15, TENPIN15 at checkout for 15% off your final order. But that's enough out of me, you guys. Let's get into it. This is 10 Pin Life Podcast number 19 with Verity Crawley. Well, yeah, I guess the only way to really start this conversation is happy belated birthday.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. What did you do anything fun for your birthday?
So I actually stayed in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was at Junior Gold and I could have left. I was kind of done with my storm duties, but I decided to stay so that I could hang out with a few people. I ate a lot of good food. I went to a sculpture gardens. So it was fun. A little bit of sightseeing, spent some time with friends. So can't complain.
How was the Junior Gold experience this year?
It was really nice. I'm always very overwhelmed by the amount of kids that are there. And I think coming from the UK, where I had a lot of youth bowling, and I was very thankful that youth bowling was decently alive when I was growing up. And that's kind of what got me started. But we never had anything like Junior Gold because there's just not that many bowlers. So for me, it's always been so eye-opening to be able to see the amount of kids that are there and some of the talent that they have. I mean, even at the under 12 level, I'm like, wow, you're going to be really good one day if you keep with it. So that's really cool. And this year was my first year actually representing Storm at Junior Gold. So that was really nice. And there was just, I mean, there were so many kids that like knew who I was, which oftentimes I don't realize that that's the case, right? I obviously have a decently strong social media presence, but to know that the kids actually know that and follow me and want a photo or want an autograph, I think was very cool.
Was there a time, like, was that, I guess for me, once I started getting recognized in public, because it's like my face is on the internet, it was kind of a weird thing. Like, you just have random people like saying hi. But I'd like, that's a whole different level, but you've done a ton of work to get to that point. Was that kind of surreal for you to be like, there's like everybody in this room knows who I am?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I still don't think it's really hit me that that's the case, right? I'm expecting that people are just queuing up in this Storm booth because they know that they want to see Norm Duke, or they want to see, I don't know, but I've never really felt that it's me. But then sometimes when people speak to you and they're like, oh my God, I can't wait to meet you. I've been queuing for 2 hours to see you. And I'm like, wait, for me? That's crazy. And I don't think that I will ever realize it. As many as I hope that continues to happen year after year, I still don't think it's going to actually hit me.
Yeah, for sure. And the social media thing is actually something that I wanted to touch on. So I do want to get there, but you brought up kind of like the youth bowling portion of your life. And so in all of the conversations that I have with pros, a lot of times I like to focus on what their bowling story is, because it's really easy to focus on those moments like you had in Nashville last year, right? And focus on the wins and focus on the big highlights. But so many of us don't get there, and I really do find it more fascinating to know how you got to that point. So, and I know you've told your story a lot about how you started really young. So I guess I'm kind of curious, like, how do you sort of kind of just condense down what your bowling story is, if somebody was like, how in the world did you become a professional bowler?
Oh, that's a tough one to condense it down, honestly, because I feel like I
Hmm.
went through so much, I bowled so much. But I think the craziest thing for me is that I never really felt like I was good enough to get to that level, but I also never thought it was possible. So growing up, I was never really that aware of professional bowling to be able to say, oh, one day I want to become a professional bowler. And I
Hmm.
remember writing in my school yearbook when I finished, like, I think somehow I will always keep doing bowling, right? Like, I
Hmm.
bowled so much as youth, but I didn't know that I would be able to take it to this level. I had no idea that I was going to come to the US and study at university in the US. And it's just kind of everything kept happening to where I got to continue bowling. And it was
Hmm.
one of those things to where bowling was always the one thing I wanted to do. I never really had this desire to work in a certain field or have this dream job. For me, it was always, oh, I know I'm going to work and I'm going to do something, but I'm always going to bowl.
Hmm.
And it just kind of, I got opportunities to be able to be in the US to compete at the collegiate level. And for me, that was really the stepping stone between going professional and also bowling professional events as an amateur. I think if I
Hmm.
hadn't have done that, then I wouldn't have felt like, oh, maybe I should try going out on tour one day. That was one of the biggest things I did after I graduated was I bowled as an amateur and I competed
Hmm.
in a few events to figure out, hey, is this something that maybe one day I want to do? And I really enjoyed it. I bowled pretty good, I thought, for having no expectations, and it made me want to go pro.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so crazy, like from an outsider's perspective, to hear that, because you were really successful at Weber, and
Well,
like to
it's kind
have
of
that.
true, right? Like,
r-
as an
Yeah.
individual, if you look at the individual statistics, we never looked at that at Weber. We
Hmm.
normally people are, teams are set on making the all tournament team and you bowl all six games, whereas our coach didn't want us to make all tournament team. He didn't want us to have that individual side of it. So I felt like I actually kind of didn't do a whole lot as an individual at Weber. I had
Hmm.
2 years where I made the intercollegiate singles championships, and one of
Hmm.
those years I made the TV show, but that was kind of the most that I had done as an individual at Weber. And it's so different going from team bowling, like collegiate team bowling, to then bowling completely by yourself, which is really what bowling is, because bowling is such an individual sport. And
Hmm.
growing up, I knew that. Growing up, all I did was compete by myself. But as a junior bowler, I didn't really win a whole lot. Like, I had a little bit of success when I got older, and that kind of opened my opportunities to come to the US. But when I look at my youth bowling career, I felt like most of it was me being frustrated at the fact that people told me I was good. Yeah, I'm finishing seventh and I'm missing making Team England. I'm not getting picked to go to the team. I'm just missing winning tournaments. Like, that happened so much to me as a youth bowler, and I
Hmm.
really never felt like I was good enough because I was focusing so much on the results. I was looking so much
Sure.
at, well, I've never won. How can you tell me that I'm good?
Hmm. Do you find that you're kind of a results focused person like that, or is that shifted over time? Like,
That's 100% shifted. So I would actually
yeah.
say up until about 2019, I
Hmm.
felt way too results orientated because I
Hmm.
thought that I needed to win in order to believe that I was good. And I
Yeah.
felt that because my whole youth career, I felt I've never done anything, I've never won anything. Okay, I did have, I'm not going to say I never won because I did, but compared to the amount that I bowled, I always felt like, why do I keep losing? And why do people keep telling me I'm good when I keep losing? So I feel like I focused so much on wanting to get those results so that I could finally feel like I was good enough. And it's taken me a long time to realize that it doesn't work that way and that it's not all about the results.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So like that youth bowling experience, it gets you into Weber. That's actually one thing that I've been curious about. Actually, since I talked to Diana like almost a year ago now, because she was obviously a teammate with you at Weber. What was the recruiting process like? Like that's one thing that doesn't really get a lot of attention. Like, how do you go from being a bowler in the UK to being a bowler in South Florida?
And you will actually find that mine and Diana's story is pretty much identical in that
Sure.
essence. So for me, what happened was I bowled a European Youth Championships for representing Team England. And I did bowl really well, though. I won a few medals, I shot 300, and it was kind of my first experience to where I felt like I bowled great. And from there, I was contacted by a few different universities. Weber wasn't one of them at the time. A few different coaches reached out to me, and I was kind of like, do I want to go to the US and bowl? And I wasn't really set on any of the universities that reached out to me. Like, they were in cold locations. I knew that the bowling teams weren't necessarily ranked the best in the nation. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of shrugged them off and decided, like, if I'm going to go, I want to go to somewhere that has a really good bowling team, because in the end, I want to get better. And my
Yeah.
other thing was I kind of wanted to go somewhere that was warm. Like, I'm in the UK, it rains a lot, it's cold. Do I want to go somewhere where it's like winter all year round? I was a little bit against that. But anyway, I was contacted by Sid Allen, which a lot of people probably don't know, but from the international scene, he's one of the best coaches in the world. And I had worked with him in the UK, so he knew who I was from a young age. He reached out to me and said, hey, have you ever considered going to Weber? And I said no. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
well, would you think about it? And I said, of course. I mean, they train at Kegel Training Center. For me, that was like, the big awe of, improving your bowling game. So
Mm-hmm.
he actually sent my bowling videos to Del Warren, who was the head coach of the program. And it all
Mm-hmm.
spiraled from there. Funnily enough, the head coach of the women's team, I never spoke to until I showed up at Weber. And he's like, I'm like, hi, I'm Verity, nice to meet you. And he's like, who are you? Like, he'd never spoken to me. He didn't really recruit me. It all happened through Sid and Del. So that was kind of a little bit of a funny story. And being international, it's obviously a different recruiting process than it is in the UK. But having coached also at the collegiate level at SCAD, I've kind of
Mm-hmm.
experienced how to recruit. And for me at SCAD, it was kind of the case of, we want to try and look at all of the tournaments throughout the year. So we would look at junior gold and team masters and team trials, but we're also looking at European championships and world championships so that we can see all of the players across the world, not just within the US. And it did tend to be the case of, okay, we will look at those championships and then we will look at the players and maybe we contact them, maybe we get videos from them.
Mm-hmm.
There was times where the head coach at SCAD actually went to an event like that. She went to the World Championship so that she can actually watch some of the players in action.
That's awesome. Do you find like when you were doing that, and I believe that the coach that you're referring to is Katie, who if I'm not mistaken is like one of your best friends too.
Yeah.
So that probably helped a little bit too. But when you were in that process, because I know that's you did, because you were assistant coach for the 1 year, or was it 2?
I did it for 3.
It was 3. My goodness,
Yeah.
I can't count. I have a 3-year-old, so my concept of time is completely blown out. It's just gone. So, when you were doing that though, like in that recruiting process, did you find like the kids that were like on the international stage, was it different? Like the ones that were like succeeding, were they different from the kids that were maybe succeeding stateside? Or was there differences there, or was it just like?
It's hard to say. I would say the international players have probably a little bit more of the competitive experience bowling for their country, which the US, I think, is a little bit harder to come by. Obviously, you have those junior team players, but I think they're a lot harder to recruit than the international players that are bowling for their country. But you just have a wider pool because there's more countries, so there's more players. So I would say that they've competed more on a team level for their country, which obviously when you have that team bowling experience, that makes it easier to transition into college.
For sure. Because yeah, like you said, team bowling it's a completely different animal. But it's, and I don't know if you share this opinion, I so much prefer team bowling over individual bowling. Like how, because you obviously you've succeeded at both levels now. Do you have a preference, or is it just as long as you're standing on the approach and throwing the rock, it's good to go?
I mean, I do agree with I love both, but I think individual for me would win it. But I
Cool.
obviously do that a lot more.
Yeah.
The reason I loved collegiate bowling so much is because you have that common goal with those players, and some of those players you're with for 4 years. So I think that's kind of special because you create this bond, you work together for that common goal for 4 years, and then when you if you have that opportunity to win a national championship together, obviously it's special. It's special to stand on the approach and have 7 people behind you that want you to strike. But it's hard as well because you have that, you don't want to let them down. Whereas when you're bowling by
Mhm.
yourself, it's just yourself that you're letting down.
Yeah, for sure. And especially if you're in that and you're really results oriented too, like that can accelerate that impatience quite a bit too. I know that when I was coaching, that was one of the hardest things to coach kids out of was just like, hey, if you miss in the second frame, it's fine. Just go get it in the seventh. And it's so hard because it feels so much more compressed. Whereas if you're bowling by yourself and you have 8 games rather than having 12 frames, you have 80. It's like, well, if I throw this one out the window, it happens.
It's like you have one bad game in an individual block and you've got 7 more games to make up for it. Whereas in the team side of things, if you're bowling the individual games and you shoot 150, you're going to be on the bench. So you don't get a chance to kind of come back and redeem yourself, which I definitely experienced a lot.
Yeah, for sure. When you were coaching, was there anything that you learned about yourself or about the game that you kind of revisit often, or like something that just rings true in your head now?
I feel like there's so much. Coaching definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I loved it because I was constantly watching bowling. I was constantly, watching ball motion, which for me actually helped me with my own game. But I think one
Hmm.
of the biggest things was often I would tell the players, let's say a suggestion of a move or a ball change. And of course they listen. And sometimes I'm telling them, like, hey, just listen to your gut. Whereas
Hmm.
sometimes in the moment as a bowler, it's so hard to do that. And you then don't trust yourself. So it's one of those things I'm thinking, okay, if I'm telling the kids to do that, when I'm bowling myself, I also have to do that. Like I can't not do what I'm preaching to them.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then like that process of going through ball changes most often is like the thing that is make or break between making shows and not making shows, or like winning a match and not winning a match, that sort of thing. Have you found that your gut has become pretty accurate in the last couple of years? I guess is maybe a
I
next
would
next question.
definitely say it's getting better. I think the biggest thing is that the more educated and the more knowledge that you can have, the better
Hmm.
those guesses are going to become, right? In the
Yeah.
end, it is a guess. So the more educated that guess can become, I think the better chance you have of succeeding. So the more
Hmm.
knowledge that you have about your equipment, the more knowledge you have about lane play, obviously it makes those decisions easier because you feel like those decisions are correct.
Yeah. And you also have a good, like, this is actually something that I've been curious about too, because I got the chance to be around Sean Ryan quite a bit during women's, just like, not that we're talking or anything like that, but just being present, like or approximate to the conversations that he's having with the guys and also with the gals, with the couple stops I was able to go to. And you've got Jim Callahan and a couple other ball reps that are floating around, or Matt McNeil on the women's tour, that like they're doing the thing that you were doing. What is that process of working with one of them like? Because they obviously know a ton, but they're not throwing the ball.
Right. I'm probably a little bit of a different opinion to a lot of people out there because I don't believe that ball rep should be a job. I believe that as an athlete, we should be able to make those decisions and choices by ourselves. So
Yeah.
I probably speak to them a lot less than a lot of other players do because I want to make those decisions by myself. In the end, I'm the one throwing the ball. I'm the one seeing the ball go down the lane. So I make those decisions. Now, every now and then, yes, I might come up to them because I've got 55 ideas in my mind and I just need to blurt it out. But most of the time, when I blurt it out, I've created the answer myself. So I don't
Hmm.
necessarily, sometimes Sean will just stand there and he's like, I like go off on one. He's like, you good now? Yeah, I'm good. And then I'll walk away. Right. Whereas other players may need to be told to move 2-1. So that's kind of where I think I have that little bit of a different view on things. I think they're a great sounding board. And every now and then, they're great to get advice of, okay, where is so and so playing? Like, can you go see who's leading and tell me what ball they're throwing? Tell me where they're playing. And then I will make those decisions myself.
Mhm.
And I think in the past, I've kind of struggled with during qualifying. Oftentimes I trust my gut so much, but then I get to the TV show and I feel like I need to listen to the ball reps versus listening to my gut. And sometimes that can get me in trouble. Now, it might work both ways. They might see
Mhm.
things better than I see things. So
Mhm.
it's just about creating that relationship with them and making sure that terminology, we're on the same page, because bowling's one of those sports to where it's not really that black and white in terms of, okay, you say your ball's picking up early, or you say your ball is too quick. Okay, well, what you describe as your ball being too quick, does that mean the same thing to me? And I think if you
Mhm.
don't have that understanding and that communication with the ball reps, then obviously it can get too confusing. If they're telling me, okay, Verity, you need to use a slower ball, and I pick up what I consider a slower ball, that might not be a slower ball to them. So
Mhm.
you kind of have to make sure, at least I think in the off season, that you've had those conversations with them so that when you get to the events, it can be a quick communication because you know exactly what they mean. And then in the end, it's up to the player whether they listen to that rep or not. Sean might
Mhm.
tell me, hey, you need to throw your dart code. And I might not throw it because it's still up to me to make that decision.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic, because like, you're absolutely right. That is not how a bystander like me would picture those types of conversations, right? Because you're right. Like, these guys are and gals are getting paid to tell you what to do, basically, right? To use the information and the knowledge that they have to make your job a little bit easier, I guess. So that's an interesting way of looking at it. But I respect it too, because you get so used to seeing the 55 feet of the ball motion that you have, because no
Mhm.
one really sees the first 5 feet. But when you're standing at the foul line, it's, well, I know what I want to see. I know what works. And having that faith. Have you found, like, having that trust and faith in yourself, like, has just generally resulted in better results?
Yeah, 100%. Because it's kind of one of those things, right? If my gut tells me to throw the dart code, but
Mhm.
Sean tells me to throw the phase two, well, if I listen to him and I throw the phase two, I'm probably not going to commit to it because I don't believe
Mhm.
it. So
Mhm.
that shot, regardless of whether that was the correct bowling ball or not, that shot's not going to be as good as the shot that I truly trust my gut. So let's
Mhm.
say the gut shot is maybe the wrong ball, but because I throw it so much better and I truly believe it, it's going to succeed over the shot that isn't committed. So that's kind of where then the whole mental side of things kind of comes into it as well. And I think in the end, trusting the gut is most important. And sometimes that's what the ball reps are there for. Sometimes you give them 3 ideas and they tell you, they might say to you, okay, like, which one do you want to do? And you say it and they just say, okay, go do it. Because they
Mhm.
know that too. They know that if they try and second guess you and give you another idea, there's going to be a little bit less trust there. So then the
Mhm.
shot's not going to be as good. So I would rather trust my gut first and that be wrong and then go and do something else than
Mhm.
have that doubt in my mind that, oh, well, my gut really wanted me to throw that ball.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like that. If anyone is listening to this or watching this, take that as a piece of advice. Just grab the ball out of your bag that you think's gonna work and just throw it. Just throw it really well. Cause,
And I
like,
think the biggest piece of advice from that is learn your own game, because in
yeah.
the end, you know your game better than anyone knows it, right? As much time as I might spend with the ball reps on the summer tour, that's 3 months out of the year. So for those 9 other months, they are not watching me throw a bowling ball, but I am throwing the bowling ball. So I should know my game better than they know it. And again, it's still my responsibility to talk to them and make sure that I can create that relationship whilst we're on tour, because there are times where they're needed. There are times when I might need to know that lane 45 is hooking 7 more than lanes 44. That might be information that is good to get from them. But then again, they might tell me that. It's up to me with what I do with that information. Do I make the move and trust what they said? Or do I wait and do I see it for myself?
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. You just described it all so well. I don't even have a follow-up question. Normally, I can transition things, but you just nailed it all. I am I one of the things that I wanted to really make a point to ask you about, because I think like between the social media stuff and the fact that this season and last season on the women's tour, I mean, you've experienced a pretty good amount of success. Like, sure, you can say that there's only one win in there, but I wouldn't look at it that way. Like, that's just me. Like, you've had two really, really good seasons. And obviously this one isn't done, but you kind of highlighted the thing that I really wanted to put a lot of focus on is process, and the fact that like you're not really a goals oriented person. You don't even like in social media, you don't even communicate that you're a goal oriented person. Like, a lot of it is about patience and just trusting the fact that it will happen when it happens. And I, as a bowler myself, it's like, if I'm having a bad day, it's like I can actually go there and read something like that and be like, okay, she's competing at the highest level and she's 100 times better than I am. What am I freaking out about? What is that process like? Because I believe you bowl full time, so you're always working on it. What is your quote unquote process from? I know you work out a lot, you practice a lot, you compete a lot. How do you kind of surmise or kind of put all that together?
It's hard. But I think that, I don't know, the more that I focus on the results, the worse my results are. And that was something, it took me a very long time to realize that. But now, since I've been focused more on the process, there is so much more enjoyment. Because let's say you go to a tournament and you bowl awful and you're so focused on the results, well, you're going to kind of put that tournament away as a really, really bad event. Whereas now, when I'm focused on the process, I take that tournament as, okay, well, I learned so much from it that it's only going to help me get better the next time round. And I think that has kind of been a big learning curve for me, as well as when I go to these events and I'm constantly learning, it's only going to make me better versus dwelling so much on that bad game, which then just causes another bad game or another bad tournament. So I think that's kind of been pretty monumental in my game, is that there's so much more enjoyment when you're focused on the process, that I want to go to these tournaments and I want to be able to look around and be like, wow, I'm bowling against the best in the world. This is so cool. Versus, oh my God, I need to shoot 200 today. Otherwise, I'm not going to make the cut. Because then there's no enjoyment in that. And just focusing on those results becomes miserable. So for me, that's been what's been so enjoyable, is that I'm actually enjoying the bowling, right? I'm enjoying the process of learning and growing and getting better. And I know that, there's going to be bad performances in there because we're all human and we're learning. But as long as I can enjoy that, then that's what matters.
Yeah. How much is physical fitness a part of that for you? Because you were, and I don't know if this was a Weber thing or a whole colleges thing, but the 2016 Strength and Conditioning Athlete of the Year, which very people probably know, which I think is fantastic. Losing you here. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is not being great right now.
Yeah.
I'm frozen. There we go. Are we better now?
Yeah, we're good.
Sorry about that. 2016 Strength and Conditioning Athlete of the Year. I think a lot of people know, if they follow you on social media, that strength and conditioning is a big part of your life. But how much of that would you say is a part of your game? How much of that is part of your process?
So now it's a huge part of my process. Back then at Weber, we were forced to work out, and that's how I felt. I felt like, oh, I have to work out, right? It was such a chore. That last year, I kind of started to realize, actually, it might be benefiting my bowling a little bit. So I put a lot more emphasis into it. And then since then, it's kind of been that thought of, like, you look at every other sport in the world and they're athletes, right? I wanted to be an athlete and I wanted bowling to be perceived as that. So I got a little bit more into it. And then I realized how much it benefits my game. And for me, one of my biggest weaknesses has always been ball speed. I always felt like I threw the ball a little bit too slow. So for me, it was, okay, well, in order to increase my ball speed, I need to get my legs moving a little bit more. And I felt like in order to do that, my legs need to be stronger. I physically need to be stronger. And obviously, if anyone's kind of seen our schedule on the PWBA tour, it can be a little condensed, especially this year. It's been a lot of bowling back to back to back. Well, if I have no physical fitness, then I have no idea how I would be able to handle that, right? And in a sense of I would be sore, I would be exhausted. Like I bowled 153 games or something in 18 days from Clearwater to the Classic Series to the US Open, and my body felt great, right? Like I had a busted open finger, but that doesn't count, right? In terms of physical fitness, I felt great, and it kind of gave me that confirmation of how important this fitness is. And don't get me wrong, like there's times where I am far from motivated to go and work out, but I think that's when you kind of have to realize that I'm working out for bowling, but I'm also working out because it just makes me feel better. Like I feel so much better in myself when I have done that workout, when I'm eating the right things. The amount of energy is completely different. And I just feel like so much better.
Mm-hmm. Do you do you find that when you practice on the lanes too, that like is fulfilling, like going through the process of just getting better, hanging out in the Kegel warehouse, like with whoever with it, I mean, I know I always pay attention when you're hanging out with Janowitz because he's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's like, do you find the process of practicing pretty fulfilling too?
I do. I mean, for me, I think that everything I do in practice is preparing me for the tournaments, because when I get to those tournaments, I want my subconscious to take over, and I want to be able to have that thought process of, okay, well, I did all of the work in practice so that I can be out here and compete. Like practice needs to be hard so that the tournaments are easy. And I feel like over the last couple of years, I've definitely experienced that a lot with bowling with John Janowitz. And
Mhm.
I am very fortunate to have him as a resource, and it's something that I've really taken advantage of since I moved back to Florida in the last couple of years, because he has so much knowledge and so much experience that, we need to be surrounded by that. You need to be bowling with people who are better than you. You need to be bowling with people who have more knowledge than you so that you can kind of soak that all in and get better yourself too. And that's something that I've really done. I bowl with him normally twice a week. And we bowl games together, but we're bowling on PWBA patterns, or, a PBA pattern, or a pattern that's maybe coming up for a tournament. And we're kind of going through the scenario that we might see in a tournament. And sometimes those practices are awful. Like I bowled a couple of weeks ago before a PBA event and I didn't shoot over 200 in the practice. But then I go to the tournament and I was second in my qualifying block with the guys. So it gives me that confidence that I've kind of already experienced it in practice, and I can learn some of the things that I see on the lanes in practice to make those decisions easier when I then get to the tournament. But I know that not everybody has access to be able to bowl on different patterns and to bowl with people who are better than them. So it's kind of one of those things to where you have to figure out what you can do with your resources to learn as much as you can.
And you're providing some of those resources. You're one of the few bowlers that's out there on tour that is doing that through your Patreon. How's that going?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And that's one of the main reasons I set it up, because I know that, there are some resources on YouTube, and you might be able to scroll through Facebook and find some things. But I wanted to have one place that people can go to, that they can learn, they can get better, they can ask me questions. Like I definitely don't know it all. I have plenty left to learn myself, but as I'm learning, if I can share that knowledge with other people that's going to help them get better, then that only helps grow the sport. And in the end, I just want more people to be bowling. So if I can help with that, if I can get one person to pick up a bowling ball, or get one person to improve their average because they used a tip or a trick that I'm talking about, then I think that's a win in my book.
But doing that is a lot of work. Doing what you do in social media, I mean, you have of all of the bowlers, male, female, or otherwise, like one of the most polished social media presences that on the internet within our industry. Takes a lot of work to do that. I'm sure that I sure hope that there's people that are helping you do that. I'm not 100% sure how that works, but like, what, like, obviously there's, there is that essence of growing the sport, helping grow your brand, that sort of thing. But this might sound really like dumb, but why do it? Like, why put all that work in outside of, like, set fitness, practice, just getting better at 60 feet and 10 pins?
I think to show that it's possible. Growing up, social media wasn't as big of a thing.
Mhm.
So I didn't really know about professional bowling. YouTube wasn't as huge then. There were events and, there were shows and stuff on YouTube, but I never really watched them. Whereas now social media is so huge that if I can find one little girl or one little boy that finds my page and thinks, oh, I like bowling, maybe I can be like her one day. And I think that's really why I started it, just to be able to show people that professional bowling is a thing. Bowling is a sport and you can do it for a living. There was a time frame where I was coaching too, and I didn't necessarily do it full time, but I've just wanted to be able to kind of show and inspire people to pick up a bowling ball. And one of the best ways to do that is through social media, because it's free and everyone's obsessed with it. Everyone's scrolling. So if someone can find my post and they think, one day maybe I can do that, or maybe they do, maybe they're already a bowler and they can learn something.
Yeah, for sure. That's so when I was in Milwaukee for the World Series, when Kyle won the Cheetah Championship, and I think if I freeze again, just throw me a chat message. I can see it wobbling. But
Okay.
when I was there and he won, it was downright insane. The I hope you can hear me. I can tell that we're struggling. The internet is a great thing some days.
It's good when it works, right?
It's great when it works. But either, yeah. So, but obviously Brad and Kyle have, out of all of us, like they're kind of leading the pack. Like they've done a lot of work. Once they hit that 100,000 subscriber mark on YouTube, that was monumental. I think for the game as a whole, I think that'll be something that, like, that was a landmark in the changing of the game, for the 21st century. But when he was in Milwaukee and he won, it was the loudest I've ever, like, I've been to playoff baseball games and it was louder than that. And it was absolutely insane when you won, because I wasn't able, obviously I live in central Wisconsin. I was not there in Nashville. Like, did you find, like, were you surprised with the volume of people and the volume of the people, like, sound wise, like, when you actually ended up winning?
I don't know. It's all a bit of a blur now, to be honest. I
Yeah.
feel like I would need to go back and kind of watch the YouTube video of me winning,
Mhm.
because it was, I don't know, I felt like I was kind of in this dreamland bubble. But it is really nice to see the amount of support, the amount of people that obviously came out to watch. And I stayed afterwards and I did a lot of photos and autographs, and people wanted to stay. People wanted to take a photo. And I think that's really cool.
And it's got to be pretty surreal when you're at Bowl Expo and Junior Gold, like, basically back-to-back weeks, and you're next to Norm Duke almost like the whole time, who just had one of the coolest moments in bowling ever up in Maine. And you're just standing shoulder to shoulder with him. I mean, to a point, like, from a public perception, like, you're kind of right there. I mean, obviously he's Hall of Famer, he's Norm Duke, and to our eyes, it's like, that's freaking Norm Duke.
Yeah,
But
that's to my eyes too. I'm fangirling inside when I'm stood next to him.
so it's got to be quite an honor then to be able to stand next to him. Was that, like, did you find in the last couple of weeks that you took a little bit of that in, a little bit extra?
I think so. I mean, there's definitely a special side to it, but part of me still, I find it hard to fathom that I was stood next to him, like, not coming up to him as a fan, because I still
Yeah.
feel like that's the case. I actually we did a demo day at Junior Gold, and he was in an earlier session, so I wasn't like, well, he was on my, like, session, but he was already at the bowling center. So I, like, walk up to, there was literally a queue. So I joined the queue so that I could take a picture with Norm Duke. And I'm like, okay, I'm working beside him, but I'm still queuing to take a photo with him because that's just how I felt like I should do it.
That's valid. I mean, you don't want to cut the line, right? It would everyone else is waiting.
And I still feel that way, right? I don't have I'm far from being on the same level as Norm Duke, but he is definitely an inspiration for this sport.
Yeah. It's to have that out, like, that way out in retirement, is it was pretty special. I think that'll be something that when we look back in 10, 15 years and think about some of the cool things that have happened, in bowling, that's going to be one of them that really stands out.
It's so hard to think that he's actually retired though, right? Like
none of us want to believe it.
No one wants to believe it. And everyone I kind of has that thought of, oh yeah, that was so cool. He's going to come back, right? Everyone's so set on the fact that that wasn't actually his last time. But you speak to him and he's like, no, I'm done. I'm not bowling again.
Yeah. It's just, yeah. I mean, because he's obviously the only life that we've known is Norm Duke is on TV, right? Like, not even that he's just there, but he's in it all the time. Like, and to have, I don't. It's one of those things, right? Like, I think a lot of people, and maybe actually, maybe this is more of a question than a statement for you. But I think, would you wish for a swan song like that, right? Like, because if you wish for it and then you get it, like he got, then what do you do? Because it's got to feel so good. Like, do you want to have like that type of an end to a professional bowling career?
I mean, I don't want the career to end, right? Like, I never want to retire, but I think if you're going to go out, then of course you want it to be that way. You want to feel the recognition and the love that you've had and the amount of work that you've put in over all those years. You want to feel like it paid off and that it means something.
Yeah, for sure. It's just, sometimes you ask for what you want and then you see it happen outside of it. It's like, I really wonder, like, could I stop if that were to happen?
It's hard.
I've always made the joke, if I ever shot 900, I would retire. I've always made that joke because it's never going to happen. Like, I struggle to get 12 in a row. It's certainly going to happen 3 times in a row, but
you've got to start talking into existence. If you don't believe it's going to happen, then it's not going to happen. So I don't know
if I want to have it happen. Like there would be such a, can you imagine I mean, you can imagine the nerves, like, but to have that one's like, that would be crazy. But speaking of 12 in a row, you shot 300 at nationals this year.
I did.
What was that like?
It was cool. It was kind of one of those things to where, and this has happened a lot this year where I've shot 300. Like, I have 7 or 8 strikes in a row and I don't realize it. Like, I'm so much in this bubble of bowling. And for me at women's nationals, I was with the team. I was like having so much fun with the girls that I'm just throwing a shot and then I'm talking to them and we're having fun. And all of a sudden I'm on the 12th strike.
You didn't even realize it.
When you're so much in that flow state to where you're truly just bowling, and that's what I was doing.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, every time I think about it, if I'm on like the front 8 and I think about like, oh, I could go, it's the next shot is a 9 count. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I do. So that's pretty cool.
I'm trying too hard to get that strike. Whereas those 8 strikes leading up to it, you were just bowling. You were doing your thing.
Mm-hmm. And you also struck a lot during the team event, enough to, I believe it's official now that you guys actually won the Diamond team events. I mean, obviously that's something that will probably sink in once the trophies are presented to you, but it's, not everybody gets to have that title. Is that something that you've been thinking about a lot, like paying attention to quite a bit here in the closing weeks? And like, what is it kind of like in your head now?
Not really. I think that as a team, we never went in with the expectation that we were going to win. It was just like, we had a good team, but we were never thinking, oh, we're going to win this year kind of thing. So then when we took over the lead after that squad, it was, well, obviously that's going to get beat. Like, we were so sure that someone was going to come in even the next day and beat it, because we didn't think the score we thought it was very achievable. So then every now and then I would kind of check in with the group and we would keep kind of, oh, we're still in first. And then when it got down to the last day and nobody beat us, unofficially, was a bit mind blowing. But to me, it's also that I always feel like there's a lot more precedence put on the Open Championships than the Women's Championships. So everyone talks so much about winning an eagle. And then it comes down to the Women's Championships. And it feels to me that it's not as big of a deal.
That's yeah. I would agree with that sentiment. Because yeah, I don't know. I would just agree with that. That there, it
There's a lot
feels like
less bowlers.
there is half the number of teams, and it's 4-person teams. And it is, I think there is a part of it too from a public perception that because of the number of divisions too in the women's, that it kind of might discount it a little bit. But if I'm being honest, I don't. I would never want to discount a win for anybody. Like, I don't really care if you're bowling in your local, just your home bowling center in an in-house tournament and you beat 25 other people. Like, why would you take away from that, I guess, is my question. And especially when you get up to a level where you're winning, against the best female bowlers in the country, a lot of them in the world. I mean, if you look at the top 20 in doubles, like I was scrolling that because I was trying to just remember what your scores were. I was like, man, there is so much talent in there. It's unbelievable how good these bowlers are. Gender out the window, it doesn't matter. Like, they're phenomenal. So to say that you're, first in teams, second in doubles, and ninth in all events, like that's a really good 9 games.
We'll ignore my singles blog.
We're just not going to talk about it.
I don't think I was even on the first page of the results.
That's fine. It's just what it is. You can't put, I mean, you can put 9 really good ones together, but that I think also illustrates how impressive actually winning is how hard it is to put 3 games together on a stage like that, regardless of where it is or who you're bowling with.
Yeah. And I think it is important to remember that, right? Like, you look down the list of bowlers and everyone that bowled Queens pretty much bowled the Women's Championship. So you do have some of the best women bowling. And I do think, that sometimes does get hidden a little bit by the Open Championship. So to me, I think I just need to remember that, like, we won team, and I need to look at all of the other bowlers that were there, even finishing second in doubles. Like, we had no expectation that was going to happen. And sometimes that's the best way to do it, because when you go in with no expectations, you are far from focused on the results, and you're truly just embracing the moment, having a good time, and bowling.
For sure. And next week, you're walking into another kind of, call it, unique event. I have no idea how to say his names, so I'm just going to call him Chris. Can I just call him Chris? Yeah. Is that okay? For those that don't know who he is, he's now kind of a higher up at Kegel. Great bowler himself. Did he bowl at Weber also?
He did, yes.
Yeah. So he's got I would say, like, one of the better physical games that doesn't get a whole lot of notoriety. I believe, if I remember or know correctly, I believe he's your boyfriend too. So that helps. Maybe that makes the bowling together thing a little bit more interesting. But the Lucy doubles will be starting the day after this goes live, and you guys are first squad, 8 a.m. roll call in Texas. Like, are you looking forward to that one? Is that one that really kind of excites you?
I am. It's always a really fun event for a very good cause. There's a lot of people there. There is just a lot going on. I've bowled that event actually with Wes Malott for 6 or 7 years. We bowled together. So this is my first year not bowling with him, which is going to be very different. I was kind of ready for a little bit of a different experience. It was my choice to switch it up and decide to bowl with my boyfriend, who I bowl with him a lot. He helps me a lot with my game. And we've had a decent amount of success bowling doubles tournaments together. So it's one of those things. Do I feel really comfortable bowling with him? I feel like he knows my game nearly as well as probably better sometimes than I know my game. So it's one of those that I'm just looking to kind of go bowl and enjoy it.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's most of the people that I've talked to that are bowling that, their mindset, where it's like, yeah, would I love to win it? Absolutely. But because of all of the things that surround that event, it's not just about the competition or about the winning side of it. And then the week after that, you wrap the women's tour season in Texas, 3 events in the same center at USA Bowl in Dallas. Do do you have, I mean, are there goals going into that, or is it just, it's 3 more and we're going to put our head down and do our best?
Yeah, and that's kind of the way I have to look at it. Like, would I love to say you're going to win one? Of course, right? Deep down, that's
Mhm.
everyone's goal. Everyone wants to win. You know that every PWBA bowler that is competing in that event wants to win. That's kind of a
Mhm.
given. So,
Yeah.
of course, there is that thought in the back of your mind. But for me, I know that if I think about that, it's not going to happen. I just have to bowl. And I really want to enjoy it because, in the end, this is the last tour event that we have for this year. So,
Mhm.
it's one of those to where if I walk away regretting, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that, then I'm just going to beat myself up over the end of our tour season. So I just want to go and kind of enjoy bowling against the best in the world. And it is my last event for this year. So it's just, make the most of being able to bowl and be thankful that we did have a tour this year. After COVID, I think it's always been up in the air in terms of how's bowling going to be. And it seems to be thriving right now, but we never know when it's going to be taken away from us again. We never imagined a pandemic happening, but it's happened. And that doesn't mean it can't happen again. So, just kind of enjoy these last 3 events because what if we don't have a tour again?
And for what it's worth, you did make the best out of your pandemic experience as a bowler, as best as you could. I would recommend everybody goes back and scrolls deep into Verity's social media, because there was it was honestly, it was pretty impressive. Like, just keep trying to keep yourself sharp, like literally bowling into your house, into pillows, bowling in your yard, like just getting your hand in a ball. It was fun, and it was fun to watch. And honestly, it created a little bit of just reprieve, I would say, as a bowler, where it's like I didn't bowl from March until September.
Mhm.
Like, it was the longest gap I had since 2013. And like I kind of missed it. I liked the break a little bit, to be perfectly honest, but also it was like once it got really in the thick of it, I was like, man, I just really want to go bowling,
Mhm.
and just couldn't do it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
So we're approaching the hour mark, and I always try to keep these to that limit because I don't want to take too much of your time. But I do want to tell you a little bit of a story that leads into a question. So, 2017, you made the show as the 1 seed for the Detroit Open.
Mhm.
For those that don't know, back in 2017, the way that they did the shows was qualified at the centers, and then did a batched TV show. So they taped 3 that day after the Players Championship. Longest, I can't imagine being on the production crew for that, because that had to be the longest day in the world. But because of the fact that it was in Green Bay, I was there. So I actually got to see firsthand your first show. And it was actually the one, because I believe it was the last show of the day of the 4. And I told my buddy that I was with, I was like, we had, like, because he wanted to go home. I was like, dude, we can't miss this one. Like, this is the one we want to see.
Quick
Uh,
interruption. No, it wasn't my
yeah,
first show.
it
It was
wasn't.
my second show of that year.
That's right. That's right. That's right. My
Carry
apologies.
on.
Uh, one of my friends, she'll appreciate the fact that I was wrong about something, because we don't like to talk about that. But yeah, I was there, and I was like, dude, we got to watch this. And obviously, the result wasn't what you wanted it to be, right? To a point. I mean, also being able to watch one of your best friends win, it's like, well, does that take the edge off a little bit? Maybe. But my question is, going from, like, if you were to talk to Verity in 2017, that's sitting there and knows that you just lost, and regardless of who you lose to, right? Like, it still hurts.
Yep.
What is the advice that you give her?
Good question. It's a hard one because I think I give the advice, but that, young Verity still won't want to listen to it because the amount of advice that I got at that time was everything that I should listen to. But it is really hard in that moment to realize. Like, I would want to tell her that, keep going. It's not all about winning, and that the results don't define you, and that you need to learn from it. It's going to make you stronger. But that was all stuff that I heard in that moment. It's like I
Mm-hmm.
would want to say that to her, but I know that in that moment, not much can really change how I felt.
Mm-hmm. But over time, maybe call it stubbornness has faded.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. Because I think for me, I had a really good rookie season and
mhm,
I started to finish second a lot. And that kind of started to build year after year, my first 3 years on tour. And I never had the expectation that I was going to win. But I think once you start finishing second, and I didn't have enough respect for the fact that I was making the shows and that I was finishing
mhm,
second. I was beating myself up too much about not winning versus appreciating the fact that I didn't finish third, I didn't finish fourth, like I was second. And I think I never realized in that moment how monumental and how amazing it still is to finish second. So
mhm,
there would have to be some way for me to tell that, 21, 22-year-old Verity, like you finished second. Like in against some of the best bowlers in the world. And I think emphasizing that needed to be a lot more important than I made it, because I was putting the thought process on you didn't win, you didn't win, you didn't win, and took for granted the fact that I finished second,
mhm.
or even I just made the show. Like that's still
Right.
huge. And there are so many people in the world that would wish that they could do that. And I think about this year, like this year, I've missed the show quite often. I finished sixth a few times this year and top five made the show. And in this moment, I'm like, well, I want to make the show. But yet when I was finishing second, I was beating myself up for making the show and finishing second. So it's just one of those things to where we obviously always want more, but sometimes you have to take a step back and really appreciate where you are and what you're doing in the moment.
That's the best advice I think you could give yourself or to anybody else. That's one of those things too. The reason that I like asking that question is maybe one day down the road you're beating yourself up again, and
Yeah.
maybe you just got to go back and listen to your own best advice. I am super super curious though. We can end this conversation on a light note because I kind of already said, Detroit Open, Daria wins that for her first title. But your first title, you beat her. Did you throw it back at her a little bit? Like, did you jab it out a little bit? Like, I got mine now.
No, we never really talked about it. I think it was one of those facts, as in both of those situations, we knew that either one of us was going to win, which
Yeah.
is really nice to walk away, go have dinner that night, and we know that one of us got the trophy.
Yeah. That's okay. Fine. I just, sometimes I may have this wishful thinking of like just that friendly combative nature. So So, all right. Well, thank you very much for the time, Verity. Best of luck at the Lucy and also to finish your PWBA season. Thank you, honestly, for what you do, too. Like you said, a lot of what you do is really focused on helping build the sport, getting people's attention on the fact that it can be an option, and what you do with not only in your just bowling game, but also in the social media stuff and all that. I really appreciate. I know I know more than I really care to know how much work it is. So thank you for doing it, and keep it up. I think that that's the future of the sport. I think that that's how we grow it. We just take the bull by the horns like you are and make it happen. So thank you very much for doing that, and best of luck the rest of the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for doing this. I mean, you're doing great things for bowling too, so keep it up.
I appreciate it. Well, yeah, have a good weekend, and again, happy belated birthday.